afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Julie Smith. I am your Educational Sessions MC, and today's session has two parts. Our experts seated here on stage will be sharing insights about the key components that are considered essential to having a successful middle market product and what questions to consider as you plan your middle market strategy. Immediately following the panel's conversation, they'll join all of you in the small group discussions to take a deeper dive into the topics that we discuss here today. We invite all of you to lend your insights and your perspectives to these important conversations. And for those of you watching this from the live streaming lounge, we welcome you to join us as well. Now, to pose a question to our subject matter experts, you can submit those directly through the conference mobile app by clicking on today's session title and then scroll down to live Q&A. Don't forget, please, to complete a very brief survey after the session today. You can also do that on the mobile app, and you just want to click on that session title and scroll down to surveys. And lastly, please remember to silence your devices. The session is being video recorded, so attendees will have complimentary access to view those sessions shortly after the conference. And with that, I'll turn it over to today's moderator, Diane Burfeindt, Managing Partner at Trilogy Connect. And Diane, you can take it away.
Thanks, Julie. Welcome, everybody. As the title implies today, middle market, moving from vision to execution. As we prepared for this panel session, what we really talked about is this is the next part of the journey for Nick in terms of the tools and resources that they're bringing to all of you. So we've been talking for years at these sessions about the data that goes into middle market and the focus on it, and really the theory behind it. And I think what you're going to see today is hearing from people that are actually starting to do it, the decisions that went into it, the strategies that went into it, and really the things that are being wrestled with. Of all the things that I think about when I think about what Nick has brought us in terms of the middle market education, the one big thing that you're going to hear today as well is that you really have to apply a different lens to the middle market. And whether you're coming at it from maybe a base in affordable housing, or whether you're coming at it from a CCRC angle, either way, you're going to have to bring a new set of tools to the equation to really try to figure out how to put this puzzle together. And you're going to hear a couple of different ways today that organizations are doing that. And so as you think today, one of the things we really want to make sure that we're doing is to leave you with tools and resources that you can use. The breakout discussions are intended to do that as well, where you can actually talk with others about what you've heard today. But I want you to think a little bit about whether your strategy is trying to figure out how to serve a gap in the economic spectrum that you already serve, or whether this is totally something different for you. I want you to think a little bit about what you're hearing today and how it's really a culture shift and a mindset shift that we're embarking upon to be able to do this. So we have two speakers with us today that are going to be sharing what they've been doing in terms of middle market. We have Sharon Ricardi, who is the president of the Northbridge Companies, the Northbridge Advisory Group. And we have Amy Schectman, who is the president and CEO of Two Life Communities, both from Massachusetts. And to kick us off today, we have Ryan Brooks, who is our senior principal for healthcare for Nick, and he's going to share a little bit from the 2019 study to kick off the panel.
All right. Diane, thank you so much. I really appreciate you moderating today's discussion. I want to set the table a bit for our audience, provide some background information to kick us off. So in 2019, Nick sought to gain a better sense of the income, care needs, and demographics of the future seniors housing resident. And in that vein, Nick issued an RFP that was ultimately won by NORC at the University of Chicago. And Nick provided them a grant to conduct this first of its kind study. Going into the study, Nick understood that there's a senior population cohort on the upper end of the financial spectrum who can afford the current private pay seniors housing model and whose care needs are being addressed by the existing private sector. And on the opposite end of the wealth spectrum, public assistance and government subsidies are available to help serve that population cohort. Nick's study focused on the population between these two groups, those seniors who have too much wealth to qualify for government assistance, but not enough wealth to afford the existing senior housing and care product. In the study, it looked at financial wherewithal, but not just income. It also included home equity and retirement savings, and matrixed this information by healthcare needs and demographics. And this provided investors, operators, and policymakers with foundational information to make strategic decisions on the issues associated with the middle market. And the hope was this study would create a dialogue around potential solutions in seniors' housing and care that address the need and opportunity of this cohort. And the study was so well received that it was actually the 5th most read health affairs article in 2019. And in the months following its publication, the study prompted both a health affairs-sponsored policy forum in Washington, D.C., as well as a middle market investor summit in New York. And in addition to these summits, each NIC conference since the study's publication has had at least one session focused on the middle market. In the fall of 2019, there was a session focused on financing the real estate for the middle market. In spring of 2020, a session focused on addressing the healthcare needs of this cohort. And most recently at NIC's 2021 fall conference, we focused on middle market operations and care delivery while highlighting 2 real-world examples. Now today, as we continue advancing this concept from vision to execution, we're able to share 2 additional examples of successfully implemented middle market senior housing with Sharon Ricardi representing Northbridge Community and Amy Schectman representing Two Life Communities. And before I get too far into this, I also want to give a shout out to Amy Schectman for being a Hall of Honor inductee for McKnight's Women of Distinction. That is really well deserved. Congratulations, Amy. But before I turn it over to our panelists, let me just set the stage here. So what is it about middle-income seniors that makes them the forgotten middle? Well, there's been a variety of generational shifts that impact seniors' housing needs in the next decade. First, when we look at retirement savings, we know that pensions and 401ks, or pensions and defined benefit plans, have become less common, and they've been replaced by 401ks and defined contribution plans. And as a result, future seniors have lower overall savings than prior generations. And compounding this challenge is that future seniors are also less likely to be married than today's seniors, and having spousal support enables many people to stay in their homes longer and means assets and financial resources remain pooled together. And the utilization of family caregivers is an option really regardless of income status, but keep in mind that people are having fewer children, and those children are less likely to live nearby, so practically speaking, this solution is becoming harder and harder to make a reality. So as a result, the options available to middle-income seniors are pretty limited. Typically, their options have been to either lean on family or unpaid caregivers, or they must spend down their assets until they become eligible for Medicaid. So when we look at the senior of the future, there are other aspects that will look a bit different than the senior of today. So first, future middle-income seniors will be more racially and ethnically diverse than today's seniors. This population will also become more educated in the next decade, as the number of people who did not graduate from high school will decline, and those with 4-year college degree and above increases by almost 60%. These factors contribute to a rightward shift in the forecasted income distribution of future seniors because higher levels of education mean fewer seniors living in poverty. And fewer seniors will be married, however. So today, 61% of seniors are married, but that number drops to 52% for future seniors. So I'd like to go into a bit more detail about the challenge of utilizing family caregivers for this cohort, or in other words, what would it look like to have to rely on family members to serve as unpaid caregivers? Well, as you can see here, only 60% of the middle-income seniors aged 75 and older even have the option to lean on family caregivers. But the remaining 40% of the population either have no children or those children live too far away, making it difficult for them to serve in a consistent family caregiver role. Now, it's interesting to note here the total number of care provided by family caregivers has remained steady from 1989 to 2012, but these changes in marriage patterns, birth rates, and proximity of adult children means it's really unclear whether or not this trend can hold as the senior population continues to grow. So what have we covered so far? So we know the future middle-income senior, they'll be more diverse, they'll be more educated, they'll be less likely to be married, and if they have children, those children will be less likely to live nearby. So these demographic shifts, they've resulted in fewer available caregivers, which we know as a ratio falls from 7-to-1 adult children to care for a parent over age 80 today, to 4-to-1 in 2030, and ultimately to 3-to-1 in 2050. So what does that mean for the living arrangements right now? So it means that nearly 1 in 10 middle-income seniors are living in their homes and not receiving the care that they need. Or put another way, among the senior population living at home and needing assistance, almost 40% are not receiving the help they need. So now that we've defined the population, let's quantify it. So as of 2014, there were about 20 million seniors aged 75 or older. 7.9 million of these are considered middle income. By 2029, that number will increase to 14.4 million, accounting for 43% of all seniors. So we've defined the middle market, we've quantified the middle market. Let's now cover some of the health characteristics of the segment. When we look at the 14.4 million seniors aged 75 or older in 2029, a few health characteristics really stand out. 8% of this group will have some form of cognitive impairment. 60% of this group will have mobility limitations. And 20% will be considered high needs, which is defined as having 3 or more chronic conditions and 1 or more functional limitation. And keep in mind also that the 75 to 85 age group brings these numbers down. So if this group was 85 and older, these numbers would be much higher. So where does that leave us? How many of the 14.4 million Americans, 14.4 million seniors can afford the current cost of senior housing? Well, with the annual out-of-pocket price point of assisted living at $60,000, which is the current average, 6.6 million of those seniors would have the financial resources available to afford it. And this is with housing equity, by the way. And as that price point goes up, the market size shrinks. And as that price point goes down, the potential market size expands. And since we're talking about potential market size, I wanted to pull some information from the Nickmap ranking report to try and illustrate the point that there's really no single metric you can look at to determine whether an area is suitable for a middle market product. Take these 3 markets, for example. So shown here is just a quick pull of a few metrics, including median incomes, income distribution, average seniors housing rent, existing inventory, and penetration. So Austin, Texas, of the 3 metro areas, has the highest median income. But Dallas, Texas, has the highest percentage of 75 and older households making between $25,000 and $75,000, which is kind of our middle market income range. But then again, Miami, Florida has the lowest senior housing penetration at 7.6%. Some people say that a higher seniors housing penetration means the market understands and accepts the product being offered, but could this also mean there's an opportunity in Miami, Florida? So you really have to think about these in context. Certain metrics matter more to some people than others, and you can also look at Medicare claims from specific metro areas to better understand the population's care needs. You can look at housing prices and the general affordability of different markets, because remember, the Forgotten Middle study looked at the care needs and financial wherewithal of the country as a whole, but we really need to do assessments of the care needs and economic health at the local market as well. So just consider this a bit of a sneak preview, as this is something that Nick will start looking at more in depth. But I really hope that sets the table a bit for our upcoming discussion. We've got some great panelists on the stage here that have a lot to contribute to this conversation. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it back over to Diane for some question and answer.
Thanks, Ryan. Your last slide there really made me think about the fact that middle market really is just so very regional. And I think that's one of the things that we keep hearing, and I think that was a great illustration of how you can't necessarily solve this nationally. And so I think even more this is going to be really important, the discussion that we're having today. So we're going to do this in a couple of different ways. I'm going to have Sharon and Amy talk for a few minutes about their specific organizations and projects, and then we're going to have a moderated discussion. So Sharon, turn it over to you.
Okay. Thank you so much. Well, certainly everything that you just talked about comes into play for the experience that we've had. And I'll share two different scenarios with you, one more replicable than the other, but the other one kind of unique and I thought somewhat interesting to share with this group. So first of all, I will say, because it's a little confusing, who do I work for? So the Northbridge Companies is a regional owner-operator of assisted livings, and I am now the president of a division of that, which is Northbridge Advisory Services. And in that role, and in my previous role as vice president for Northbridge, we had talked for a long time about the middle market. Our company doesn't do middle market. They do more high-end assisted living. But we, too, saw the data and the statistics that we've just been talking about. And we've been talking just as long about the baby boomers. We know they're coming. The silent generation is easing out, and the baby boomers are coming very shortly. So those two seem to have a lot in common, and they need to be understood and addressed by our industry. So we were talking primarily, the founders, Jim Coughlin and Wendy Nowakunski of our company, we talked about, well, what can we do? Is this an area that we can go into? Do we have the expertise? Do we have the funding for this? And they're kind enough to let me explore it in many different ways, particularly in Massachusetts where we're headquartered. We're really trying to use public policy to help make some changes to at least address the affordable portion so that we were taking some band off of that group that finds assisted living unattainable. So one of the things that we did, I went and flew around the country and looked at some affordable assisted livings. And through that, I met people from two different organizations, the Downing Group and the Carding Group. And they knew about my interest in affordable and middle market and invited me to see some of their product. And I was impressed with it because I was concerned that, in fact, I wouldn't find it something we would want to put our name to. But I found them to be quite nicely designed, well-run, well-operated, and meeting such a niche. So I started to talk to them, and then they asked us to be their operators, which is not where I was expecting to go. And we decided we did not want to be the operators, but we partnered up, and we're going to talk about partnership, I know, later in this talk. We partnered up with another local assisted living company, Hall Keene, that does do affordable. They do tax credit particularly, and have good expertise in it, have their own in-house tax credit compliance department, in fact. So we partnered up with them, and we are now working with that group, the Carding Group, and Craig Cardona, the developer, in Washington, D.C. to have, we were going to be the first, but we just missed it, so we're the second affordable assisted living in D.C., 157 units, and it is through a collaboration with D.C. Healthcare Financing and a very favorable rate, a very favorable Medicaid waiver rate through their EPD waiver. And we were able to then work with them, and that's the first of 4 projects that we're going to be doing with them. And the nice thing, and this is where it rolls a little bit into middle market, because it is proformed as 100% affordable, but we're not restricted with having affordable. We are going to look to bring in people in the middle market. And what does the middle market mean? I was just talking to somebody about that. It's very ill-defined, almost as ill-defined as active adult. But we're going to define it as about 25% less than the going rate in DC, which is one of the highest markets in the whole country. So that's where we're going to bring middle market to the DC, which desperately needs it. It's a very expensive place to live. So we're going to do affordable, probably 80% affordable, and 20% middle market. So that's maybe not as replicable as some of the other examples I'm going to give. So now we have this organization, Hall Bridge Partners, which we're going to look into the middle market as well as affordable. And we had some opportunities during COVID. COVID exposed what is a growing problem, I think, in our industry. Certainly in New England, 20 years ago, there was an explosion of building of assisted livings, and those products are aging. There's a lot of aging products throughout our country. And they, if they were already having census challenges, which many of them were, COVID really, did them in. And some of them were orphans or geographically orphans with bigger companies, and they were fairly anxious, frankly, to get rid of them at a discounted price. And certainly if you're going to do affordable, one of the things you have to look at is acquisition costs. You can't pay a lot for it. You can't generally be in, high barrier to entry markets. DC is different, we'll put that aside. But generally you can't be in high barrier to entry marketplaces. So we were able to buy 3 properties in 2 different acquisitions. And those properties we bought at, a discount far below what we could have, replacement costs would have been for them. And, worked really hard, lots of late nights and, throwing away models that didn't work, came up with a model that we felt worked for the middle market. And so we're trying these out. 2 of them are in Maine. One is an AL, which we've added IL to expand that market. It's coastal Maine. It should attract IL. And the other one is an all-memory care, which we added Maine Care, which is a subsidy. A waiver subsidy. We added Maine Care to it to be able to let people spend down. For middle market, we're still not going to be able to bring people in with Maine Care, but they can stay. So once they've spent down their assets, which as we all know, generally are coming from the sale of their homes, they will be able to stay with us. So that's how we did those 2. And then in Connecticut, we had a product that, and again, you don't want to buy in, for instance, Hartford, because then you're dealing with the very high cost of staffing. So, we bought a product that was outside of Hartford so we can still get decent rates, but we can have lower costs because as certainly anyone who's going to go into the middle market will understand, the cost of acquisition is just the beginning. We've turned down buildings that they wanted to give us for $1 because we couldn't make it work. We couldn't pencil it out. So cost of acquisition is one thing, but from there, it's how you operate it. And one of the things we found out too is you can't go bare bones. They may feel that, we may call it middle market, but for them, it's all the money they have. They are spending a lot of money for it. And you have to understand that and treat it that way. What they're looking for is value they can afford. And isn't everyone looking for value they can afford? So we still put signature programs in it and try to really make it something that people can be proud to put their parents in. And I think, we have not by any means figured it out, but we're working at figuring it out. And I think that's something certainly that our industry as a whole, as we continue to work with, the pressures of public policy, we need partners to do this with us. We call in favors all the time to try to make a middle market product work for us. But, I'll let you know in 3 years how well it's going. But we have owned the properties in Maine and Connecticut for a year so far. And proud to say that the property that was had 20% occupancy when we bought it is now at 97% occupancy. Wow. So something's working.
Wow.
Thanks.
Great. Sharon, before we go over to Amy, I just wanted to ask you, you had mentioned several models you kind of tried to pencil out and had to select some. So it sounds like, if I have this right, you have one model that includes Maine Care, you have a model that includes independent living, is that correct?
A model that includes independent living, yes.
Okay.
And it's, those of you who have maybe done independent living within an assisted living building, no, it's not, we're not talking active adult here, we're talking the step before assisted living. And because that particular community does not have memory care in it, we wanted to do somewhat of a feeder. And we found a lot of people where, coastal Maine is extremely expensive in the summer, for example. So we are doing advertising in places we would never normally advertise because we're advertising to the, to the summer birds. What's that word? And, so that people often have a place in Florida. and this is their summer place, and it's still less expensive. So that might not seem too middle market, but you know, when you go to Florida, you can get a home down there for $200,000. So we look like a good value for them to keep those ties in coastal Maine, which are so important to them.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Amy.
Thanks. You advance this like that. Ah. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for inviting us. This is a different audience than what we're used to, so I'm really thrilled to be here. And Diane asked me to talk about our journey to get to serving the middle market, and I feel like it's been more of a trek than a journey, but let me do my best. You know, there's a Chinese proverb that the journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. So our single step is who we are. We are a developer, owner, property manager, and direct service provider for 6 campuses. Some of these are on the same campus, 1,400 apartments of deeply subsidized affordable housing for older adults. If anyone's interested later, I can explain there's different levels of subsidy, different levels of affordability, different sources of each of these. But for now, let me do the summary version. Our median annual income in our portfolio, people who live with us, is $11,325. That is median annual household income. So despite this level of poverty, I would assert that our residents live better than most older adults in the entire country. Our commitment to building and nurturing community, to maximizing the resources brought into each of the households, our partnerships and relationships with regulators and service providers, and our intentionality about what we call aging in community has meant while we have people living 62 and all the way to 105, but they all tell us that they love living with us. They give us a net promoter score of 66. Some of you will know that. When I first heard that, I thought, oh my God, 66, that's D. But turns out it's actually really rather good. And when asked on a scale of 1 to 10 to rate the level of enthusiasm with which they would recommend us to friends and family, at 10 being most enthusiastic. 90% answered 8, 9, or 10, and only 1% said 4 or below. And the thing they say they like best is that the staff know my name, understand my situation, and believe in my goals for myself. While 35% of our residents are over 85 and 33% are nursing home eligible, in fact, we only lose 2% a year to nursing homes. And one of the things is our 24-hour, 365-a-day staffing, which is unusual for subsidized housing, so that 90% of the time last year people pulled their emergency cord, we were able to resolve it without an ER visit, without a 911 call. And one of the ways we can do all this is because our residents are so low income, we can get everyone on food stamps, everyone on Medicaid, everyone on Massachusetts' version of long-term services and supports, and we're able to raise considerable philanthropic dollars. And from this experience, and we've been managing this property since 1970, we know that our folks feel loved and supported and nurtured and seen, and not alone. And all of you probably know the stats. Worth reminder that loneliness doubles the rate of dementia, vastly weakens the immune system functioning, increases heart attack and stroke by more than 47%, and vastly increases the rate of depression. And I think goes without saying that economic stress is stressful. So that's another thing. We always say the 2 biggest challenges to aging optimally are loneliness and affordability, and we address both simultaneously. So that brings me to our mission. Because we believe so passionately that every older adult should by right have the opportunity to live a full life of connection and purpose in a dynamic, supportive environment, that's how we define aging in community. We think as a nonprofit, we have a moral imperative to create aging and community opportunities for everyone who doesn't have it now. So we approach this rather analytically. Now, don't try and read all of this slide. It's very complicated. Here's the point we want to make. We mapped out eligibility for housing subsidies and eligibility for services and supports and found 2 gigantic market gaps. I call them abysses. The red dots, the red box, shows that the way we build affordable housing now, which is the low-income housing tax credit, and the way we support people with services, there is literally not a single point of overlap. To serve just low-income housing, tax credits, it's 45 to 60% of area median income. To serve the services, stop at 35%. We're working really hard on that problem, closing that gap, but that's not for today. Today is the green box. And that's just what Ryan talked about, and you have so beautifully illustrated. Too much to qualify for subsidized, not enough for what's in the market. So we're in the middle of developing our very first opus. If you want later, I'll tell you why we call it opus. And our starting point, of course, is wanting to replicate what we do so beautifully for our low-income older adults. But some pretty big obstacles. One, I think AMI is the wrong measure, but it's the best I got. We're not going to get any government subsidy whatsoever, not construction, not operating, end of story. Second, the cost of home care in our market is extraordinarily high. If you want to buy it, you have to buy 4-hour shifts, and it's $35 an hour. And with my own mother of blessed memory, what happened was she needed a half an hour in the morning and a half an hour at night, and I had to purchase 8 hours, and that runs through. And Medicare Advantage, which is the one Medicare product that might cover it, we only have 26% of Massachusetts doing Medicare Advantage. 3, incredibly expensive land and construction costs, and staff, as Sharon mentioned. Massachusetts minimum wage is $15. Our minimum wage at 2 Life is $19.25 an hour, $40,000 just adds up to a lot. 4, we live in a market in Massachusetts where the high-end CCRCs are high-end and gorgeous and spectacular. And even though our folks can't afford them, that's sort of their framework. And the 5th obstacle is we rely a lot on philanthropy for doing all the things we can, and I don't think we can for this market, or it'd be foolhardy to count on it. So, can't rely on our typical sources. And if we believe in all the programs and services are necessary that we do now, we would have to charge enough money that it's not middle market. So, Catch-22. So here's how we responded, for a few ways. 1, take advantage of housing price escalation. We talked about that. Our first opus is in Newton, Massachusetts. It's a suburb of Boston. The median the median house price right now is $1.7 million. So we peg our upfront costs. We're asking everybody for what we call a community share. Other people call it entry fees, a little different, close enough. We peg it so that it's less than that. So with $1.7 million being the average, our 76% of our upfront prices are below halfway point, below $800,000. So that's less than halfway point. And almost half are below $550,000, which is the 1/3. So almost everyone will pay less than half or 1/3 of what they sell their house for. Our goal from the beginning was house rich, income poor, to keep the monthly fees really, really, really low so people don't run out of money. And you have to think about the care needs, not just about the housing needs. So we're going to be offering monthly fees that will range from $1,640 a month to $3,800 in 2022 dollars, which includes all the utilities, high-speed internet, about 20 meals a month, all programs and services. And that compared to the average 2-bedroom apartment in Newton, which has nothing, no utilities, no services, no nothing, as we say, the average is $4,000. So our highest price will be less than the average price for an unsupported unit. And then here was the real thing that moved us over the edge. We expect everyone to volunteer 10 hours a month or more in a meaningful way, so much that it actually reduces the staff and overhead costs. When I first suggested this to our marketing people, they thought I was absolutely insane and that was the worst idea they ever had. And as it's turned out, not only is it not a deterrent, it actually is the biggest reason people are attracted to our community. We can talk more about that. 3, we're not trying to be all-inclusive for the non-necessities, so we offer a la carte pricing and choices. We're not going to have dinner every night. We'll have it many nights a week, but we don't expect everybody. You can use the restaurants. One of the volunteer jobs will be group takeout. We're located adjacent to a Jewish community center. We're going to offer heavily discounted membership. Go ahead, swim over there and do those kind of things. 4, we're locating, now I can show my next slide. Where you see Coleman and Coleman 2, Coleman is one of our existing deeply subsidized affordable housing properties. And we're locating it right next to, so we can have a single campus director, a single maintenance director, et cetera. And the connector building in the middle, you'll see it's all glass. It actually is in between Opus and Coleman with a door on each side. So it's an income inclusive community that leads to efficiencies. It also leads to making it, I'm almost done, really attractive. Because for our service partners for doing the home care, now you've got 400 people on the campus, it's worth it. And that is how we're breaking the high cost of care. We partner with home care agencies. They're eager to get into the middle market, eager to have 400 people at once in a density. And so we'll have people on staff. So instead of having to do 4 hours, you can purchase your half an hour. Finally, in order to keep people at all points of their aging journey, we're going to have care navigators, wellness assessments, and we'll keep track of people's health insurance. So let me stop there, say we'll talk, eager to talk a lot in question and answer so much, but let me conclude with we're now in our priority depositor program. We have 284 households on that list for 174 apartments. Our market study says that we need to capture 0.9% of the market to be successful, less than 1%. Right now we're finalizing final design and construction pricing this month. We're out in the market now, approaching investors and capital market partners, and we'll start taking the actual hard deposits the last week in April. We are super excited and eager to talk about anything you're interested in. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. Amy, I want to start with where you just left off because you were talking about financing. Anything in particular, and Sharon, I'll ask you the same thing, your biggest hurdle that you had to overcome in terms of the financing and working those details out?
Some of the hurdles, we are asking people, normally in a CCRC kind of thing, you ask people to contribute 10% as the first deposit. But because our folks don't have assets outside of their home, we are only doing 5%. So there's been some about that, but we're fighting pretty hard to have that. Another one is that, without getting too nitty-gritty, the kind of requirements for days cash on hand and other reserves, we're breaking through some of those because we want to serve people, we want to provide all the money. We think, because this is a product of extremely low leverage, it's a $140 million deal, long-term debt's $22 million, so it's very low leverage, and we feel that that is a good reason for having lower reserves in the way other people think of the reserves. We've got them in our own unique way. Those are just two easy examples.
Thank you. Sharon.
Well, I would say some of the difficulties with financing are specific to the project, of course. And the project I talked to you about earlier in DC is, as I mentioned, a tax credit project. And those of you who have worked in tax credit know there's a lot of stumbling blocks there as far as, when the dates you put it in service, you then have a very short runway to get it essentially full, to get it stabilized. And of course, with, we're currently building the community will be open in September or October, but it was supposed to be open in June. So those are some of the issues that you deal with. It's a calendar year that the clock starts for putting it in service. So certainly, if you're doing a tax credit project and you've never done one before, make sure you've got an advisor that really understands tax credit and can help you out with that. And probably the other thing I would say in the more traditional middle market that we were talking about before is, you need to work on your biggest expense is going to be staffing. And in both of these projects, I've gotten myself involved for the last 2 years with workforce development groups to see what we can do about workforce development, because those costs, staffing costs, can be just runaway costs. And nowadays, when you're talking to people financing, like we're talking to people financing the next DC project, they're well aware of that, and they want to know how you're going to deal with those costs. And you really need to have a plan that will be beyond, certainly what they don't want to hear is we're going to have such a good culture that people will stay for the lower rates that we're going to pay than everyone else, and that's not going to cut it anymore. And we all know that it was a long time coming that these people that work for us deserve higher wages, but we still need to figure it out and to have a true plan in place that is something that will stand the test of time and not just get you through your first 6 months open.
Mm-hmm. So you've both talked a little bit about partnerships that have been important to put this whole puzzle together. Amy, you were talking a little bit about your resident partnership with the volunteering, co-location, home care. What other partnerships can you think of, or even what do you think is the most important one of those?
Me first? So the home care and the medical side are really critical. So we aren't going to do home care directly. We are partnering with an agency, and that, again, will allow people to do the small increments of care. We're also working on our affordable campus with a PACE partnership. Do people know what PACE is? Program for All-Inclusive Care for the Elderly. That's for dual eligible populations. So you have to be Medicare and Medicaid. There is a private pay PACE option, but it's too expensive. So we're working with our PACE partners. Remember I talked about the red box. So we're working with the PACE partners on the red box, but one of the things they're working with us is moving over to the green box by having a special kind of all-inclusive health care and housing and home care insurance product that will spill over to the middle. It's still a work in progress. And then we will also plan to have a partnership with a geriatric care practice, doctors and nurse practitioners that will come on our campus and bill insurance. And we will have our own care navigators as part of our staff, but that will work with all of the different partners so that we'll vet them and know really what we're recommending. Those are some key partnerships.
Yeah, so your red box really showed, that graph really showed how you have layered in the existing funding mechanisms with partners who know how to do that to try to get all of those services for your residents.
Right, it's easier for low income because I can get the state to pay for all those partners that I have, and we have partners. I mean, they're actually on our site, and that's a whole nother set of stories if you want, but it's easier if you're wealthy. It's that middle that makes it so hard. That's why we need the density as an incentive to provide, to make it worth it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sharon, can you tell me a little bit about yours?
Yes, some similar. We're working with Elderbridge, which is a PACE provider in DC. They're going to be opening right down the street with us, and that's not by accident. We talked to them ahead of time and let them know we were building, and they thought that would be a good place to build as well. But also, when you are looking for third-party reimbursement payments, one of the things that we found is it's really great to work with them very early on. For instance, through this EPD waiver in DC, there's a very long process currently because they had 33 affordable slots for assisted living. I don't mean buildings. 33 people were on the affordable waiver before these two properties were being built. So they're somewhat overwhelmed with all of the new applications for it. So we worked with them early on because we found that they had a process because we just sat down with them and said, what is your process? How do you approve people? Mm-hmm. And their process was we go through this, and then it gets handed off to these people. And they do this, and then it gets handed off. That's 120 days right there. And that's if everything went perfect, which you know it never does. They never have all the right paperwork. So we worked with them just, because their goal is the same as our goal. They very much care about their seniors. They want them to have this. They're very excited about these projects. And we were able to help them take these two projects and have them parallel to each other, cutting down the approval time in half. And that type of an arrangement, not just assuming that's the way that's the way it goes, those type of affiliations are helpful for everybody, but particularly us. When you're affordable, you can't afford to have people, because sometimes they move in from out of state to get eligibility, and then you would have them for 120 days and up, and they have no payment. And it's not retroactive. So those type of collaborations, I think, are hugely important, and we need to keep thinking out of the box as to how we can make things work better for this group that we're trying to serve.
Could you both tell us a little bit from your perspective how the staffing is different in your middle market from whatever you typically do? How does it change? What did you have to do differently to make this work? You want to go first?
Sure. First of all, it's not nearly as different as we would like it to be. We would like it to be a lot different. But, care is the basis for what we do. We have to do good care. So we need the same level of experience and training and so forth. And for most of them, we need to pay them about the same. But what we are doing is, as I said earlier, we're doing workforce development. And so we're trying to just kind of lift the CNAs is mainly who I'm going to be talking about, nurses' aides. We need to lift it up and make it a profession so that we can keep them longer. The turnover rate is atrocious. Even before COVID, it was 60% turnover. Now it's like 70% nationally. It's atrocious, and we need to professionalize it. So what I started to say earlier, I've been working on workforce development, and our goals are 4 things. We're looking to have a higher minimum wage so that lifts all boats. In 2 of the states I'm working in, Massachusetts and DC, we're working to get the age that they can start lowered to 17 so that we can start training them up and getting them interested in this profession in high school. As soon as they leave high school, you don't have a good place to grab them and bring them into this profession. One of the things we're working with the Board of Nursing in DC to allow additional training, like when we train someone from a CNA up to a med tech, that training counts towards them being able to become an LPN later. So that all these steps of training we're giving them are not leading to nowhere. They're leading to potentially an LPN, which now is a professional job that people, can aim for. And then there's a 4th one too. I forget what it is right now. I know. We're looking to have partnerships so that we can get some of the training money. We're working with the Rodham Foundation, who is giving us money to work on how we can take the problems that keep people from going to training and solve them. Daycare, transportation, and I need some money while I'm going through training. So we're working with foundations that have the money to help bring people out of the service jobs. Just, I'm waiting on tables, that's getting me nowhere. I have no time off, I have no 401k, and bring them into a more professional level.
Thank you. Amy.
So I think a few answers on our staffing. One is we've always done this kind of creative thing with overnight staffing. So we take some of our apartments, we pull them offline, we give them rent free to someone willing to work overnight. And that means it's, you avoid the rent, which is a loss, but it does create a really nice community environment. And so we don't have to provide staff after 5 or before 8. And that's one thing we do in our affordable, we'll continue to do here. The second is here sharing with Coleman. As you see, they're on the same campus. It's enormous to have only one of all the leadership levels serve both campuses. And the third thing is volunteerism is turning out to be outrageously effective in terms of the key. Just to give you an example, we had a wonderful reception for our priority depositors, and by the end of the night, one of our new residents came up to me and said, he showed me paper. He had recruited 30 people for a chorus. He said, we're going to be the Opus chorus, and I'm going to be the music director. Can that be my job? Well, we actually hire chorus directors at our other places. We don't need to hire that here. I have a few people who are academics, and they have already lined up lifelong learning sessions. We normally pay for that. These are their friends. We're going to get that for free. And so the volunteerism is turning out to be quite significant in keeping our staffing costs down. Someone, I won't say their name, but they're a Pulitzer Prize winning author, like this huge, and she said to me, don't ask me to teach writing, don't ask me to teach books. I'm setting tables. That's what I want to do. And so we have people setting the tables and clearing the, so it's going to make a big difference.
Great. What do you think, Sharon, what do you think you talked about acquisition costs, and I don't want to presume that was the biggest thing that helped you be able to do this, but is there a one thing that really helped you be able to change this equation to be able to do middle market?
Well, acquisition costs was important. It certainly was important. But, also I think a lot of it was figuring out how to maximize the potential that we had at the community. We had, this happens so often, I think, when you have communities that have been around for a long time. There were, apartments that had been turned into offices, and they were offline as far as revenue development. So we certainly brought those all back online. We put in some fairly sophisticated systems to capture all the revenue that we are entitled to, like service levels. That's hugely important. And we do, I will say, we do have volunteers too, but you can't pro forma for volunteers. So, we love them when we have them, but we still have to budget to have all the staff that we need. But certainly, when you're doing middle market, anything that you can do to bring in volunteers and so forth is extremely helpful for you. But what we did, to finish that conversation, what we really did try to do is maximize the potential and maximize occupancy. If you're going to have vacancies in middle market, it's going to be really difficult to make your bottom line. So one of the things we do spend a lot of time, and I think I talked about that a little bit earlier, is we wanted to make these communities seem like they weren't middle market. We wanted them to seem to the people that were coming in like, oh, wow, I can afford this. I never thought I could afford this. And one of the things that we do, for instance, in our community in Connecticut, which has a memory care product, we brought in a program called BBET, Behavioral-Based Ergonomic Therapies. And we got a ton of press on that. And that really helped us fill that unit up. And then when you've got your most expensive product filled, it takes a little bit of the financial pressure off of you, so that you can, that you can focus on doing other things with, keeping your PPD of your food, for example. It's lower than our other communities, it has to be, but it's still a good product. We spend a lot of time on a good product for a lower PPD. One of it is scratch cooking. You have to do scratch cooking. It's so much more expensive to do pre-processed foods. And we do little things, like we still have lobster and we still have shrimp. We love that in New England, but we have them against each other, not two separate nights, because then everyone's going to order the shrimp and the lobster. So we just really sharpened our pencil and looked at everything, cut out anything that the residents wouldn't notice was gone, frankly, and kept everything in there that we know is a high lever of satisfaction.
So you mentioned occupancy, so it begs the question, does it take a different type of marketing for middle market? Amy?
So, marketing for anything is different than affordable housing, because affordable housing, we take over 22 years to clear our waiting list right now. It's not exactly a big challenge. But what we're marketing here is a lifestyle and a belief system. And it's not the lifestyle of a CCRC of luxury, cruise ship. It's anti-cruise ship, anti-luxury. It's people who say, I've spent my whole life trying to make the world a better place. I'm committed to changing and being for social justice. I want to continue that, and I want to be with people. And that's really how we've been marketing and been remarkably successful. And then the other part of the marketing is the positive value of community, the importance of loving kindness as a way to live. And in that, can I tell one quick story about the volunteer? When we did the market, those focus groups, and like you're behind a mirror and you watch, and we had professionals, and they said, if you would have to volunteer to come to this community, would you rather have it be 2 hours a month, 5 hours a month, or 10 hours a month? Now, 83% of people chose 10 hours a month. So I wasn't allowed to talk, but when it was over, I went in and I said, what is wrong with you people? Why are you picking 10 hours a month? And there were two answers that I remember most vividly. One woman said, this is going to be my community for the rest of my life, and I'm scared. What if people don't like me? What if I don't fit in? But I know, because I've been volunteering for my whole life, that if everyone who chooses to volunteer 10 hours a month, they'll like me, I'll fit in. That was one. And the other guy, I love this one. This guy said, well, I'm shy and I'm lonely. And I've been to these presentations, and you're going to tell me 100 times, oh, you could sit at any table and everyone will be so happy to have you. And I'm going to tell you 150 times, I am not ever sitting at a table where I don't know the people. But I was a librarian And I'm going to be the curator of the books at Opus. And people are going to come in, and I'm going to say, can I recommend a book? And they're going to say yes, and we'll talk about what books they like. And I'm going to recommend a great book. And then they're going to come back because I did such a good job. And then they're going to ask for more book recommendations, and we're going to talk. And then they're going to invite me to sit at their table, and I will. So that's who we're marketing to.
That's awesome.
Sharon.
That's awesome. So we're not-for-profit, and they do have a wonderful reputation, and we're a little bit needing to, because Hallbridge is new, we're needing to set ourselves up as something that they understand and recognize. But in the meantime, what we have found is middle market, more than anyone else, I think, they're local. They are moving in locally. They live locally, or their children live really locally. And so we play up on that. Like our community in Cape Elizabeth, Maine, for example, is a great example of that. What we have found there is that when we market price forward. Price forward. We don't say, oh, surprisingly affordable. We just put the price out there. We put it on our digital ads. We do 85% of our advertising is all digital right now. And we put the price right there, which people never used to do. It's right on our, right on the website. It's everywhere because we're proud of the prices, and we want them to say, oh, I can afford that. I didn't think I could because my sister-in-law went to that other one that is crazy expensive, but I can afford this one. It's someplace I live nearby. And the big surprise that we got, too, is that we have a lot of people that are multi-millionaires moving in to our middle market product because it's in their neighborhood, and they are not, adult children love the glam and the modern touches that a lot of the new places have. But the seniors kind of like something a little more comfortable. Look at the cozy fireplace and library. So people with lots of money are choosing us too because it's local, and they like to save money even if they have money. We're definitely finding that as well.
Thank you. We're going to move to the next section, but I want to check in first with my colleague out there, Jim, to see if we have any questions from the chat that you want to bring up to us. Okay.
Are we on? Great. I know that we've talked about staffing a number of times, but I have a question here. Does it make sense to think about using technology to make staff more efficient in middle market housing? If so, what kind?
We're just talking about this. So yes, technology for staffing. I have looked at this a lot over the years, always hoping for that, magic bullet where technology helps with staffing. So I think technology helps in ways like getting staffing, using on shift to send messages to your aides to make sure they come in and take their shift and so forth, keeping track of them, all of that. But as far as eliminating staffing by using technology, not so much. I have not, I have seen, robotics programs and so forth. I was just at Senior Living 100 last week, and I went to a presentation. That's why Amy is laughing. I went to a presentation about a product. I won't say the name because I don't want to give them a bad name, but I was really hoping to hear that this product, which works in the dining room, it can clear tables and bring things back into the kitchen. So at the very end, of course, everyone was very anxious to say, and how much staff hours did it save? He said none. It didn't save any staff hours at all. And, so we're still looking for the right technology that could help. I'm sure people are working on it, but frankly, I have yet to see something that I could take out even at half an FTE because I had that technology.
And I know this is not exactly the technology they were talking about, but I will say technology and the needs for technology have increased our staffing needs. And certainly during COVID, we saw that where we had to do so much online, and we needed to add staff members to help our elders figure out how to consistently do that. That will be a volunteer. People have already signed up for Opus, but technology more seems like an added challenge, not a labor-saving thing.
Thank you. Jim, any other questions in the chat? Okay. So we're going to move now. I think our NIC staff is going to help us move to some breakout sessions. I'm going to ask, we're going to have our panelists are going to join you down along with Jim and Beth Mace and some other of our NIC staff. And we have Julie coming up to help to help herd everybody, I'm going to ask our panelists to start moving down as well.
Okay.
And we thank you.